Rise, man.
The Force will be with you.
Always.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Star Wars Meg. The moment we've all been waiting for has arrived. Episode 1 of Season 2, Chapter 9 has finally dropped on Disney+, and I've watched it twice, and this is my full breakdown video. So in a few moments, there will be a 10-second spoilers disclaimer. That will give you enough time to click away if you don't want to be spoiled. But if you do stick around, there is so much to go through, and then after I've been through the whole episode, I will give you my authentic, original, unscripted review. So as I say, without too much jibber jabber, let's get into it. So the moment you hit play on Disney+, it gives you a Season 1 recap. I decided to watch this till the end just to get the authentic Disney+ experience with The Mandalorian. So we start with Mando walking on the planet that we see in the trailer, the one with all the graffiti, and the child is with him. There is slow hip-hop music playing in the background, and it's a really cool soundtrack. We then hear slight growls and see red eyes in the distance, hiding beneath the shadows. So Mando then comes to the door of a fight club and sees a Twi'lek. Mando informs this man that he's there to see Gor Koresh, the green one-eyed guy we see in the trailer. So the Twi'lek then lets him in and says, enjoy the fights. Then we see a really cool series of shots of Gamorreans fighting. There are various alien species that we see cheering on and jeering and being a little bit aggressive, but it's a really cool sequence nonetheless. And then we see Mando sit next to Gor Koresh himself. It's at this point that the dialogue between the two is exactly what we hear in the trailer. Gor Koresh tells Mando this is no place for a child. Mando tells him what his quest is, to find another Mandalorian, and that he came to Gor Koresh to help him locate it because he got word that Gor knew where this other Mandalorian or Mandalorians are. So then Gor Koresh bets Mando that if the Gamorrean that he's betting on dies, in the next minute and a half, then he'll tell him where the Mandalorian is in exchange for Beskar. Mando refuses, but then Gor gets out his pistol and blasts the Gamorrean. Then Gor and Gor's clan point a gun at Mando and reveal their intentions to steal his armor that is made of Beskar. Basically, all Gor Koresh wants is Mando for his Beskar. Mando retaliates and attacks the Twi'lek from the door and the other people who are on Gor Koresh's side, and while Gor tries to make an escape by running away, Mando chases him and grabs him. He hangs him upside down with the rope like we see in the trailer, and Gor gives in and tells Mando where one Mandalorian, a male, is. Tatooine. Mando doesn't believe him at first but concedes and leaves with Gor hanging there, assuming that, of course, Gor was telling the truth, that this Mandalorian was on Tatooine. And then we see the title screen and the reveal for what the name of Episode 1 or Chapter 9 is, The Marshal. So this goes against all of the rumors that it would be called The Search. It was actually called The Marshal. And that gave me great hope for the episode because you're left questioning, well, what could this mean? Well, we find out quite soon. So next we see a shot of Razor Crest heading to Tatooine. We see the lady from Season 1 who repairs crafts and all of that, and her name is Pelimoto, and she's also seen with her droids. So Mando basically needs her to do maintenance on the Razor Crest. She sees the child and is excited, calls him cute, and we do get a lot of light humor in this scene. And then Mando tells her, I've been quested to bring this one back to its kind. Again, something that we heard over and over in the trailer, teasers, and TV spots. But she can't help him because she's never seen a member of its kind. She's never seen a Yoda species, and she says she's seen all the aliens from the galaxy, but this one she's never seen before. He asks her where Mos Pelgo is, because that's where the supposed other Mandalorian is. And then we see an Easter egg because she asks one of her droids to bring over the map, and we see R5, of course a flashback to Episode 4, A New Hope. And I really like this Easter egg. It's very subtle, but also brings back reminiscence of the original trilogy on Tatooine. So the astromech droid shows the map of Tatooine, and she points out where Mos Pelgo is. She said it's an old mining settlement. Mando asks her if he can borrow the speeder bike, and we see him go. We see some really awesome shots of the Tatooine desert at this point. So then we see Mando camp out and speaking with the Sand People before continuing his journey, and we see another shot from the trailer of Tatooine, the one with the lying bantha there, the skeleton. And then we see some more desert creatures as Mando arrives on Mos Pelgo. And this is a really cool scene because it's a really kind of slow shot through the village, looking at locals and looking at how life functions, basically. It's very rare we get to take a moment to breathe in The Mandalorian and in Star Wars in general to really appreciate the shots and the scenery from different planets. So Mando then enters a bar and sees the Weequay bartender. The child, by the way, at this point hasn't really had much to say, and I will say overall that in this episode, in this chapter, the child doesn't really have a role whatsoever. So the child is waiting outside. Mando goes up to the Weequay and asks him about the Mandalorian that he's looking for. The bartender says that the marshal of the village is one, and then we see what at first I thought was Boba Fett, but it's actually Cobb Vanth in the Boba Fett armor. Mando is of course very surprised, so Cobb Vanth asks Mando to drink with him after ordering a drink, and then removes his helmet, revealing that it's Timothy Olyphant playing Cobb Vanth. He says he's never met a Mandalorian before, and obviously Mando is very skeptical because he's wearing the armor and he's a bit confused, so he asks who he is. Cobb Vanth, and I quote, says, "I'm Cobb Vanth, Marshal of Mos Pelgo." And this basically confirms what we know from the Aftermath novel, Empire's End, in that Cobb Vanth did get Boba Fett's armor. So it's a nice little tie-in with that if you are a fan of that book series. Cobb Vanth then reveals to Mando that he bought the armor from Jawas. Mando demands the armor, Cobb refuses, and then Mando threatens, and they have a very Western, space Western style face-off. And just before they can get to fighting, they hear a large rumbling and the whole bar starts to shake. It's like an earthquake, so to speak. So they both go outside to see what it is, and something is heading towards them in the distance. At first I thought it's a sinking sandstorm, but no, it was a giant creature who we later learn is called the Krayt Dragon. They go back inside after Cobb says, maybe we can work something out. The child, by the way, is still at the bar. He was hiding in a little pot, which is really cute. Cobb Vanth then says he will protect Mos Pelgo at any cost, and that's what his main role was, to protect them from the Sand People and from this Krayt Dragon, this huge monster. So then he makes a deal with Mando. He says, help me kill it, and I'll give you the armor. So Mando then agrees to this deal, and of course this was not Mando's plan, but as you know as a bounty hunter, it's always possible you will be sidetracked by missions and things you didn't really have planned in the first place. So then we see them both on speeders because Cobb Vanth is going to take Djarin to where he knows the Krayt Dragon lives. And we see some really awesome scenes again of the Tatooine desert. And then we get a huge Easter egg because while they're on the speeders, Cobb Vanth explains to Mando how he got there, and he says it was after the Death Star exploded, and you see this hologram of the second Death Star exploding, you know, of course, another callback to Return of the Jedi and the original trilogy. Then we see flashbacks to how Cobb Vanth came in possession of Boba Fett's armor, again more from Aftermath. Basically the story goes that Cobb was wandering for days in the desert, hungry and thirsty, and he saw the Jawas appear and they helped him basically. They gave him water and they gave him a bit of shelter. Now he was carrying crystals that he took when he first escaped after the second Death Star exploded. The reason that his village had to flee was because of the miners who came in and they kind of took over. Now Jawas wanted these crystals and they offered him various things for it, but it was only Boba Fett's armor that he would agree to. So then the trade-off happened. Then we get some really cool other flashbacks of Cobb Vanth using Boba Fett's armor to intimidate. He uses the weaponry, the jetpack. It's a really cool scene. So then we come to Cobb Vanth and Mando arriving somewhere between, some very hilly parts of Tatooine. And then a familiar Tatooine inhabitant creature arrives and starts growling at both of them. Now it's at this point that Cobb Vanth and Mando seem really scared, but Mando then approaches them and speaks Tusken to them. Of course, from season 1, we've seen that Mando had good relations with the Sand People, and in season 2 this is built upon so far. So when he speaks Tusken to them, they bond with him, they see that he's safe, and then we see actual Sand People, Tusken Raiders, appear. And Baby Yoda again is just seen briefly, but we don't really see much of him in this episode. So Mando tells Vanth that the Tusken Raiders want to help them defeat the Krayt Dragon. So then it cuts to the Tusken camp where Cobb and Din Djarin are hanging with the Tuskens. They're exchanging stories, but there's a lot of hostility between the Tusken Raiders and Cobb Vanth based on how he's treated them since he's taken over the village of Mos Pelgo. So an argument ensues between them, and Mando has to break it up using his fire blaster on his wrist, and it's a really cool moment. So then the next day they set out on Banthas. They arrive at the Krayt Dragon's cave. Tuskens say that the creature lives in an abandoned Sarlacc pit. So again, we're immediately getting more and more callbacks to Boba Fett, Return of the Jedi, the original trilogy, the Aftermath series. But Cobb Vanth declares that he doesn't believe in Sarlacc pits. Now, just as he says this, we hear the dragon growl. It comes out of the cave and eats a Tusken Raider. It's then apparent to everyone that this is not going to be an easy task. So we cut back to the Tusken Raider camp and they're scheming a new plan. Mando volunteered Cobb's village without his permission as reinforcements. This obviously surprises Cobb Vanth, but then we cut back to Mos Pelgo where they both go to try and explain to the villagers their plan. They try and convince them to join and help, but they don't want to. And more than that, they do not want the Tusken Raiders on their side. But Mando eventually convinces them to all unite and says, eventually this creature is going to kill your kids, it's going to kill your village, it's going to kill your economy. And so they decide to unite with them. And then we see the village preparing weaponry and basically preparing for quote-unquote battle. And then the Tusken Raiders come into the village to meet them on Mos Pelgo. Everyone's a bit scared. There's a little bit of hostility, like I said once more, and one or two of them kind of clash heads. But then they all head off together as one to arrive at the Krayt Dragon's cave. They all wait patiently and hear snoring from the dragon in the cave. They enact the plan. And just to make clear that the plan of action is basically to wake up the dragon, to get him angry, to get him out, and then to explode him from beneath near his belly. Because they realized he's a very, very tough, creature. This isn't going to work unless they go for his quote-unquote soft spot. So they all get into position, and let me just say that the Tusken Raiders are so much cooler than in the original trilogy and prequels, in my opinion, in The Mandalorian. They're just given so much more depth and backstory. So the Tuskens scream into the cave, and seemingly the plan works, but it doesn't really. The monster comes out, they take it down briefly, but it retaliates and goes back into the cave. So then they start firing at it, but Mando waits to give the command to Cobb to properly go for it. And then eventually, after the creature vomits and some failed attempts to bring it down happen, Mando commands now. Again, some more failed attempts, and seemingly while it looked like it worked, again it didn't. So Cobb puts Boba's helmet on and flies with a jetpack, and Mando has a jetpack as well. And they're both flying in the air, it's a really cool moment, and they start shooting the creature. Then there's absolute silence, but then the dragon appears behind them. Cobb shoots again at the dragon. At this point, Mando sets off Cobb Vanth's jetpack and sends him flying in the air. At this point, a bantha comes loose, and while Mando's trying to cater to that, the dragon is literally about to close in on Mando with his jaws flying through the air, about to destroy him. And everyone is shocked, assuming that Mando is dead. But the dragon comes back out of the sand, and Mando has thrown the detonator into its mouth, blowing the creature up. And at this point, we then see the Tusken Raiders basically rummage and harvest inside of the creature's belly, which is now exploded, and Mando and Cobb Vanth shake hands before going their separate ways. They say that they hope they cross paths again, and I'm sure they will later on in season 2. And then the Tuskens celebrate over, I presume, is an egg that they found. And then Mando speeds away into the sunset of Tatooine. But this is the big moment. The big spoiler is that we then see a helmetless Boba Fett watch on. And it's Temuera Morrison with a scar on his face looking down at Mando speeding through the desert. Then he turns to face the screen, he walks past, and then it cuts to black. Now this was such an epic episode, guys, and now I'm going to give you my raw review. So clearly from the outset, the pacing for The Mandalorian Season 2 is expertly done and much better than Season 1 in my opinion. The pacing was perfect and there weren't any dull or slow moments. I think the final sequence against the dragon may have been extended out a bit too much. There were too many failed attempts and it kind of played with the whole old-style monster versus hero kind of sequence. But except for that, there was so many flashbacks and callbacks to the original trilogy and the prequels. When it comes to Star Wars, this is basically my bread and butter. I love Tatooine as a planet. I love when they throw in little Easter eggs and little hints, and I think this has set up the season to be a phenomenal one. Because this episode, Chapter 9, was set up to be a divergence from Mando's actual plan to bring back Baby Yoda to the enemy sorcerers, it's kind of set it up in a nice way because he's met new characters now. He's got a bit more experience under his belt, and he met Cobb Vanth, someone who I think will play a bigger role in further episodes. And now we know that Boba Fett is alive, he survived the Sarlacc pit, and he will come into contact with Mando, hopefully in the next episode. But if I know Jon Favreau's style, he might not include Boba Fett till further down the line in season 2. I think we're going to have very different episodes. Every episode's going to feel like its own movie because we're going to see different worlds, different planets, different characters, and maybe they're going to put this one on hold, the whole Tatooine and Boba Fett thing on hold, and it will come in to complement other storylines from the rest of the season. So Mando will get into some more trouble and some more adventures in the next few episodes, and maybe this will unite further down the line with another plot point in another episode. So now I leave it to you guys. What did you think of this first episode of season 2? You let me know in the comments down below, and I'm wishing you a fantastic rest of the day, no matter where you dwell in the galaxy. I'm Star Wars Meg.